Hey, Rick here from Rick's Automotive. Got this 2007 Chevy Tahoe. It's leaking some gas. I'm going to turn the key here so you can see just how bad this thing really is leaking. That was just a quick cycle of the key. So we're going to put this thing up on a lift and see what's causing it. Alright, so step one, before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and disconnect both of the batteries in this vehicle since we are working with gasoline. The vehicle lifted up into the air. If you don't have a lift, you can use a jack and jack stands. I would suggest getting some large jack stands just due to the height of the vehicle and how tall the gas tank is. If you're going to slide it out and work on it, you're going to want to drop it down pretty far. So this is the fuel tank. It runs on the driver's side of the vehicle. It's held on by two of these straps. There's one here and one in the front. There's also some fuel lines that run up top along the sides and the front of the tank. And also in the rear, here we have an evap canister. You can see there's a filler neck and a fuel line going in the rear. We've got some evap lines here that go to the evap canister. We're going to start here in the back by taking all these hoses off. Okay, to start with this connector here, I tried pressing the sides to get this off, and it wasn't allowing me to get. There's little tabs you can see here on the sides. Even though I was pressing pretty hard, it still wouldn't allow me to compress those enough to get them around the edge here to allow it to come off. So I just took a little hook tool, or you can use a flathead screwdriver, and just pry these tabs on the end here to get them around the sides, and then it just comes right off. The next hose, which is just behind the one we just took off, try to move out of the way so you can see. There's a tab here where it's got two prongs on each side. You can try to get your fingers around the top and the bottom and squeeze. I wasn't able to do so, so I just used a flathead screwdriver. I was able to compress the top, not the bottom, so I just stuck a screwdriver in the tab and then pressed out to get that off. So now that these two are off, I'm going to go ahead and take off the filler neck and this other fuel line here. For the filler neck, you have two options. You can take this hose clamp off here at the fuel tank itself, or there is one just above the frame, which I can see if I can. Yeah, it's right here. It lies against the frame. These both appear to be 8mm heads, so it should be pretty easy to get off. The benefit about taking this one here off is if you've got a significant amount of gas in the fuel tank, you take it off here, it's going to spill out. So you have to get a funnel and a catch can or a catch tray to catch all that gas. If it's up top there, you can prevent that gas from escaping the tank by either crimping this hose or just keeping the hose up out of the way. So I think I'm going to try that option up top, even though I know the gas is pretty low on this. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and do that top one. Got a 1/4 inch ratchet and a short 8mm socket. Got my hose clamp off, slid down out of the way. Next, you're going to have to get the hose off of the filler neck itself. To do that, I just used a flathead screwdriver on the back side, which I'll show you here. I just stuck a flathead screwdriver along this. Here's the pipe coming down from the gas door. Stuck a screwdriver and separated the hose from this pipe, and then on this side I just twisted until it broke free. So before I actually pull that off, I'm going to go ahead and crimp this just to prevent anything from spilling out while I'm working on the tank. The next line we're going to take off is, I believe the vent line is located right next to the filler neck we just removed. It's got a round connector with two flat spots on the sides. You're going to want to press those two flat spots inwards to where it releases the tabs holding lines together. So you just take one hand like so, press those tabs in, pull the hose out. It should come out pretty easy. If you're feeling any resistance, again, as always, just double check and make sure you're pressing the tabs in far enough, but it should come apart pretty easy. Now everything back here is disconnected. We'll go ahead and move to the front. In the front, we've got a fuel line that comes in here next. It's almost right directly next to the drive shaft and the transfer case. You'll see it's got 2 tabs on each side. We're going to press these tabs like so, and that should be enough to remove the line. So we're just going to set that aside. Again, you don't want to, if you're feeling resistance, you don't want to break anything. So just double check and make sure that these tabs here on the sides are pressed in far enough. Now that we have all the lines we can access disconnected, we're going to start dropping the tank slowly. We want to be careful because we still do have some lines and some wiring connections up top we have to disconnect, but we're going to start dropping the tank. Okay, so we're getting ready to lower the fuel tank. I've got it supported using a standard floor jack and a 2x8 piece of wood. This is located towards the rear of the fuel tank because the way the tank has to be dropped, it has to come down below the rear axle and differential, because on the front you'll notice this cross beam that goes across the frame. The tank actually sits up in this, so it has to go towards the back of the car and then down. And then the straps have 15 millimeter bolts on the driver's side or towards the frame up here. So you got 1 on each strap. Once you loosen that, you just pull the bracket back and up and over out of the place where it rests, and this should come right out. And then you just lower the jack slowly. Remember, we're not going to go all the way down. We're just going to go down far enough to see the fuel connector, the connections up here for the fuel pump, as well as the fuel lines. And then once those are all disconnected, then we can lower it over to the floor. I've got the 15 millimeter bolts out. Now these bolts are out, these simply you just push up, line those grooves up, and slide these brackets off. And now you can see the tank is completely free except for what's holding it up here is the jack. So we're going to take the rear strap off and then lower it down some. I've got the fuel tank down about 4 or 5 inches. I can't see over the top here with this metal shield on, so I'm going to go ahead and take this shield off. This is the shield that runs all along the inside of the tank, closest to the drive shaft. Now you've got 3 of these little metal clip retainers here. If you just pry on 2 or 3 of these sections easily, you don't go too far back. Here, I can grab the piece I already got off. So I just pried on 2 or 3 of those. That's all the farther back I had to pry. And they just come right off. And once those are off, I'll pull the shield off and lower the tank some more. With the side heat shield off the fuel tank, I was able to follow this hose to the rear of the tank. Appears to be an evap connection. It's the same kind of connection we had earlier. Actually, it was right here on the evap canister, the one where we use the pick. You can try and squeeze the sides in with your fingers. If you can't get it, just use the pick to get the clips off the ring there. Now this is right next to the left rear spring and right next to the filler neck. This is right where we started, so it's actually, I probably could have got that earlier, but I didn't see it until now. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that off. With that disconnected, I'm gonna go ahead and lower the tank just a few more inches. We still have the fuel feed and return lines going to the front of the tank, as well as the connections for the fuel pump. So I'm gonna lower this very carefully. The fuel tank moved down probably a good 8 or 9 inches or so. I think I found the cause of my leak. It looks like the fuel pump housing, or I believe GM calls it a fuel module, is rusted through, allowing the fuel to escape from the gas tank. So this tank's going to have to come all the way out, which is no big deal because I've already got the jack underneath it, so I'm just going to lower it to the floor. But I'm going to have to replace at least the fuel pump assembly, and I'm going to check out the lines and see how those look. So for these connectors, I'm going to plug this one back in. I've already got it out. But for this connection here, you just use your thumb and pull up and then back. There's a little tab that locks over that little guy right there. Then for the other one, I use this standard screwdriver, and this side piece here, actually I had to push that back just a little, so I just use a screwdriver to push that back, and then your thumb presses right here and it slides back. Front, I've got all the fuel lines out of that plastic retainer, and you just stick your finger on the edge of that and push that in and pull it back, and those 3 lines come right out.
I tried taking the fuel lines out, but you can see, I'll try to get close up how rusted this thing is. There's so much rust buildup behind the green and blue plastic connectors. I was unable to push those in all the way to release them from the steel lines. In fact, while I was trying to apply the effort, I noticed the steel lines were starting to just break free. It took little to no effort to break those off, just to get them off the actual fuel pump module. So I'm gonna leave those on there for now and get them out once I get the tank out of the way. But everything's off, so I'm gonna go ahead and lower this down to the ground.
The fuel tank is now dropped and out of the vehicle. I've got it moved aside so I can work on it. And I have all my new parts. I have a new fuel pump module, the O-ring of this gasket seal for the fuel pump module, the ring that holds it in place, and new fuel lines and evap lines. I went with AC Delco for everything. I'm gonna go ahead and swap everything over. I started with removing the evap and fuel lines. You'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas where they're secured to the fuel tank, not including the front one we already took off and was in the car. And then there's a hose that goes into what appears to be some form of a vent here. And this just has one of those push connectors. I used a flathead screwdriver to get all the lines off. Everything came off pretty easy. The new lines are taped in place, which is awesome. So it'd be pretty hard to mess that up. Looks like everything just clips into place. That was pretty easy. I've cleaned all the rust and dirt around the fuel pump module. I'm going to take the ring off next. You'll see that there's these tabs. You want to turn this counterclockwise to free up the tabs and remove the ring. They make a special tool to do this. I don't have one. So I'm going to use the method of a hammer and a flathead screwdriver. You want to be careful when this makes contact that you don't slip off and create a spark. That'd be terrible. So I'm going to go ahead and put a rag on the end of my screwdriver to prevent that from happening. Got the ring off. Lift this guy out of here. Next, you want to take this line here off. It's got 2 tabs in the top. You just push in. I hope this comes off as easy as it's supposed to. There we go. So set that aside. Be careful, you don't want to lose that guy in there. And this should just slide right out. You get your float for your fuel gauge. There you have it. There's the old one. There's a new one. Looks like I have to switch over the float here. Let's see the wires going down. Yeah, there's a wire. There's a wire right here. I'm gonna have to connect. So I'll go ahead and do that next. This is a new fuel module. I got it ready for installation. I just double checked to make sure all the wiring connectors were right. The filter is on the pump. You can see it inside there. I did have to switch over the float for the fuel gauge. This just pops right out. There's 2 tabs in the front, and then there's 2 blue wires that I had to switch over when I put this in a new module, but it's ready for installation. Just discovered one last thing I got to do before I put the new module in. This line we took off inside of the tank, it's got the connector. We got to take this plastic piece off here. You just press out and get those little tabs around the. So I need 2 hands here. That should just pop right off, like so. We'll have to switch that over to the new module. All right, just gonna put this on the new module, slide it up, and we're ready to go. Just putting on the new gasket. I'm going to slide in the new pump and stop about halfway down. I'm going to try and reach around that to grab that fuel line we got to put back on. Now I'm going to install that fuel line. You want to make sure the mating surface on the fuel tank where the gasket's going to rest, make sure there's no debris, make sure it's clean so you get a nice tight seal. It's a spring load, so you might feel some resistance. Okay. Now I've got that in place, I'm going to install the ring. Using a rubber mallet to install the ring to prevent any sparks. The fuel pump is installed, the ring is back on, all the evap lines and fuel lines are secure. I am ready to put this bad boy back in the car. The front of the fuel tank is tucked up into that cross beam. We don't want to raise this all the way until we connect the other fuel lines and the wiring for the fuel pump. Fuel pump wiring is plugged in. Fuel line is connected. The bracket is closed. I'm going to go ahead and raise this tank all the way up. When you guys are raising this tank back up, you want to make sure, I went ahead and disconnected these lines in the back here just to allow me to get them over top of the axle and rear differential. Made it much easier. They were binding back here. I couldn't, without loosening this, I couldn't get them over. This evap line has to be routed over top of this metal piece here before we raise the tank all the way up and connect the straps. Fuel tank is raised all the way up, got the straps on, the bolts are tight, heat shield's back on. I'm going to go ahead and connect the rest of the lines. In front of the tank now, we're right next to the transfer case. Push these until they click. The filler neck back on, hose clamps tight, the rest of the hoses are all secure. We'll go ahead and reconnect the battery, start the engine, check for leaks, and make sure the fuel gauge works. Got the engine running, there is no leaks. The fuel is very low, but the fuel is reading properly, so that's good. So this one's a wrap. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We'll catch you next time.